Today we're going to be studying from Ezra chapters 3 and 4. We had learned in chapters 1 and 2 that King Cyrus had issued a decree that anybody whose heart God stirred up to go back to Israel and rebuild a second temple could go. He had given them some of the temple articles that had been taken by Nebuchadnezzar to go back with. He had given them some of the supplies, some gold, some silver, some animals, and so did the people. So they're going back with a good amount of supplies, and we learned that there was a total of 42,360 people from the Israelite people, besides 7,337 of their servants that were going to go with them, and 200 singing men and women. So a total of 49,897 have made this journey. It typically would take about 4 months to make the journey, because when Ezra went, that's how long it took him. And once they get there, we're going to see that they're going to assemble. Once they've gotten settled, they're going to assemble in a certain month, and it's the seventh month after King Cyrus gives them this decree that they can go back. So we didn't learn what month it was that he issued the decree, but we know that by the seventh month, they're beginning first to build the altar so that they can start making sacrifices to God, and then they're going to build the foundation of the temple. So let's pick up in chapter 3, verse 1. Now, when the seventh month came and the sons of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Now, they each had gone to their different areas of where they had lived, but at this point in the seventh month, they're all coming together and meeting in Jerusalem to start doing this rebuilding process. Okay, verse 2. Then Jeshua, who is the high priest at this time, the son of Josadak, and his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel. Now, this is an ancestor of Jesus, so he's from the line of David. He's from the family of David. He is not going to be allowed to be a king, but he is going to be the governor. So he's considered the leader of all the people here, but he's not ever going to be called a king. He's going to be called a governor. And he had another name when we looked in chapter 2, he went by, they talked about him with a Babylonian name, but now he's just going to keep his regular name. He's now back in his land. He's going to be referred to from this point forward as just Zerubbabel. Okay, so I'm going to go back to verse 2. Then Jeshua the son of Josadak and his brothers the priests, and Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and his brothers arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So they're building it according to the way that Moses got instructions on how to build this altar. Verse 3. So they set up the altar on its foundation, for they were terrified because of the peoples of the lands, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, burnt offerings morning and evening. Now that's how the priests twice a day would make morning offerings, sacrifices, and the evening ones usually happen around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They call it evening, but it actually would usually happen they begin doing the sacrifices around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Why are they doing this? Why did they build the altar and immediately start doing this? It's saying that they're terrified of the people around them. They're getting a lot of people that are angry that they're back in their land. They're going to get a lot of pushback from the people that have taken over Israel while they've been in captivity. They're afraid of these people because, as compared to the people that are living in the land, they have a small amount of people that have come back as compared to how many of their people that are against them, their enemies, are surrounding them. So they're doing this because they want to make sure they're right with God, that they're doing everything according to his will, because if they're not in his will, God can allow the enemies to conquer them. So they understand from these 7 years of captivity what happened when they chose not to do things according to the will of God. So they're making sure that they are getting his favor and they're doing everything the way that they need to. Okay, verse 4, it says, And they celebrated the Feast of Booths, as it is written, and offered the fixed number of burnt offerings daily according to the ordinance, as each day required. Okay, so we know that they're celebrating the Feast of Booths. Well, if you go back into the Jewish festivals, this would have been one that every year they're going to be, people of Israel required to come. There's 3 feasts a year that they're required to come as a whole. no matter whether they come back to Israel ever again, if they choose to make their home in Babylon or Persia area, again, whatever empire they got taken off to. For the 10 tribes, they got taken off by the king of Assyria. And so it's a little bit different land than what the other people, the Babylonian Empire had, although they took over some of the Assyrian Empire. So every time you had a king that would conquer some of the land, sometimes they would take over some of the land that had previously been another king's territory. But at this point, this is one of those feasts that comes in the seventh month. It would have started on the 15th day of the month. It always falls on the 15th, and it goes on for 8 days. And so this is where they begin doing what they're required to do for that festival. They're going to make the right amount of all the offerings that they're going to burn and everything that they're supposed to be doing. They're making sure they're following what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, verse 5. And afterward, there was a continual burnt offering also for the new moons, for all the fixed festivals of the Lord that were consecrated, and from everyone who offered a free will offering to the Lord. So these daily offerings were made of the animals by the priests. It wasn't just something you did for a festival, for one of these feasts. The high priest was expected every day to do 2 offerings a day, one in the morning and one in the evening. Again, he would begin around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, even though it was called an evening sacrifice. So they begin doing what they begin with the festival, but then once the festival's over, the high priest isn't going to stop making his daily offerings that he's required to do every day under the Mosaical law. Okay, verse 6. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not been laid. Okay, so they hadn't got to the foundation yet. They wanted to make sure they started building the altar first so they could start the daily sacrifices. They were, again, 15 days later going to be doing the Feast of Tabernacles as well. Verse 7. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and food and drink and oil to the Sidonians and the Tyrians, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon to the sea at Joppa, according to the permission they had from Cyrus, king of Persia. So they're getting still Cyrus's help from the neighbors. The Sidonians and Tyrians are the people that would have been in the area, I believe that is, of Lebanon. That's where they would have been getting a lot of the wood. Again, the same kind of people that when Solomon had built the temple, he got a lot of his wood from Lebanon. It was known as having good cedars, and they used it to rebuild. He used it the first time to build the temple. They're doing it again. They're asking for the help of these people, and they've got Cyrus's help to get the people to cooperate to do this. But that doesn't mean that they like them. Okay, so we're going to see in verse 8 now. Now, in the second year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua the son of Jozadak, and the rest of their brothers, the priests and the Levites, and all who came from the captivity to Jerusalem, began the work and appointed the Levites from 20 years and older to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. So they had to wait till they were 20 years old before they could serve in their capacity as this priest in the temple. And then it would also, in the Mosaical law, it also gave instructions that the high priest could only serve until he was 50 years old, because it was very laborious and very physically demanding. And so they would pick a younger man to take over once the high priest got to the age of 50. He still had the honor of being high priest, but he was not allowed to make those same kind of sacrifices every day. He had easier jobs to do because of his limitations with his age and stuff. Okay, so verse 9. Then Jeshua with his sons and brothers stood united with Kadmiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, and the sons of Henadad, with their sons and brothers, the Levites, to oversee the workmen in the temple of God. Now when the builders had laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the son of Asaph, with cymbals to praise the Lord according to the directions of King David of Israel. So King David was given instructions once he became king of what kind of job the singers had in the temple. You can see that in Second Chronicles chapter 29, verse 25. He was instructing the which Levites were going to be the musical people that played instruments versus the singers. So there was instructions that David gave, and in that particular verse that I pointed out in Second Chronicles 29:25, that's the one where God had instructed him what kind of instruments to have in the temple. I know that where I worship, some of the people don't believe that David, and not everybody, I mean, this is in my history, not so much with the people I worship now, but in my background with this particular church, I've been told by some of the preachers that David had created these instruments without God's approval. And that particular verse says that God told him to do it through this prophet. He had instructed him how to have the music being done in the temple. And so this is a verse that proves that David didn't just do this on his own. This is what God had instructed him, and he's going to continue. These people are going to continue to follow the instructions that David had gotten from the prophet on how to have the music in the temple. Now, it's not built yet, they only have the foundation, but they're still going to get the people ready. Okay, verse 11. And they sang, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, saying, For he is good, and his loving kindness is upon Israel forever. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, while many shouted aloud for joy. So that day the people could not distinguish the sound of the shout of joy from the sound of the weeping of the older men of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the sound was heard far away. Okay, so now why were the older men weeping while the other people were all rejoicing? They were the ones that saw the first temple. This second temple that they're rebuilding, the foundation, they can tell it's not going to be anywhere like the size of the Solomon's temple. It's not going to be nearly as glorious. It's a lot smaller, and they recognize that, and they're weeping that it's not going to be the same kind of temple that they had the first time. So the younger people didn't get to see the first temple. They don't know what to compare it to. They're all shouting for joy and saying, "Yay, we got our second temple that's going to be rebuilt." But the old men know that it's nothing like what the first temple was going to be like. Okay, so now we're going to go into chapter 4. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' households and said to them, Let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. And we have been sacrificing to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. Okay, so let's talk about this. These people were brought to take over the 10 kingdoms that had been taken into captivity by, it was the northern tribes. They were taken into captivity by this particular king of Assyria years and years ago, like 200 and over, probably it's been over 300 years ago now, when the 10 tribes were taken into captivity a lot earlier than the 2 tribes that eventually would be taken into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. So it was about 110 years difference between when the Assyrian king took over the land of Samaria and all where the 10 tribes were versus where the 2 tribes were. So these are the people that replaced the Israelites from the 10, all those 10 tribes. They were brought by the king of Assyria. They were told, here, you get to come here now, start populating this land. So they've been living in this area for over 300 and something years. Well, they're saying, hey, we want to help you rebuild this temple. You know, yes, we were the ones that were brought here by the king of Assyria, but we're here to help you because we've been worshiping your God the whole time that you've been gone. And they're really lying. They're really their enemies, but they're trying to butter them up so that they can get involved with helping to rebuild the temple so that they can cause problems for them. They're not there to try to help them. And Zerubbabel's pretty wise. He understands this. He doesn't trust these people at all because, again, they were involved with the kingdom that was the one that brought their 10 tribes into captivity. He's not going to trust these people. Okay, so verse 3. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, "You have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." So they're like, nope, sorry, people, you're not going to help us. So what happens? Verse 4. Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and frightened them from building. So they start threatening them, probably saying, hey, if you keep doing this, we're going to, we were willing to help you. Since you're not, they didn't fall for that trap. They're just flat out coming out and causing them to be scared of them by threatening them. Probably if they continue building, they're going to die, or whatever threats they're giving them. So because they're discouraged, they're frightened, they are now like gonna have this tension between the people that are surrounding them plus versus what they're trying to do. They're not building as quickly as they should be because I think of being frightened, but this is going to be the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. Verse 5. Well, let's go back to 4 because it's in the middle of a sentence. Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and frightened them from building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. That's going to be a long break between there. So they're coming under attack for the next, like, it's going to be, I'm thinking around 15 years that this time frame is. We'll find out as we keep reading. It's okay. Verse 6. Now in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. So they have been trying to discourage them, but they keep persevering to keep building, but they're probably not building as quickly as they like because of all the distractions. But now they're turning to this king and asking for his help to get them to stop. So this guy is now the new ruler that's going to be over the Persian Empire, and we'll see what happens. And in the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of his colleagues wrote to Artaxerxes. So this is another name, I think, for Artaxerxes. This is the one that they're going to send the letter to try to discourage them from being able to build anymore. So they wrote to Artaxerxes, king of Persia, and the text of the letter was written in Aramaic and translated from Aramaic. This is what it says, verse 8. Rehum, the commander of Shimshai, the scribe, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to King Artaxerxes as follows. Then wrote Rehum, the commander of Shimshai, the scribe, and the rest of their colleagues, the judges and the lesser governors, the officials, the secretaries, the men of Erech, the Babylonians, the men of Susa, that is, the Elamites, and the rest of the nations, which the great and honorable Asnapper deported and settled in the city of Samaria, and in the rest of the region beyond the river. And now, this is the copy of the letter which they sent to him, to King Artaxerxes. Your servants, the men of the region beyond the river, and now let it be known to the king that the Jews who came up from you have come to us at Jerusalem. They are rebuilding the rebellious and evil city and are finishing the walls and repairing the foundations. Now let it be known to them, the king, that if that city is rebuilt and the walls are finished, they will not pay tribute, custom, or toll, and it will damage the revenue of the kings. Okay, so they are saying false things about the Israelites. They had the blessing of Cyrus to be able to do this, but now he's been replaced by the next Persian guy, and this guy is going to listen to these people that are in the ones that had repopulated the land of Israel that had been from the king of Assyria that had been brought back. They're the ones that are writing to the new king of Persia and saying, look, check about these people. These people are rebellious, they're always doing things that are wrong, you check. Look in your old books where you guys keep records when you're kings and see if we're not telling you the truth. So they're trying to now entreat this new king that would not be the one that issued the decree to rebuild the second temple. They're going to entreat this king to get them to stop. And they're telling these lies. They have no intention of stopping to pay the tribute to the king of Persia. As a vassal nation, again, you could have a certain amount of freedom as long as you kept paying your tribute and your taxes and everything. They were planning on paying that, but they're being accused of saying that no, these people are falsely accusing them, saying they're not going to pay you once they get their city rebuilt totally. They're getting a lot done here. They're putting up some of the walls. They're getting stuff done, and if you let them finish, they will stop paying you their money. Just check on it. Just see if I'm not right. And there have been times in Israel's past where they've done that. King Zedekiah was a great example of that. That's why Nebuchadnezzar ended up destroying Israel in the temple, because he refused, he stopped paying that tribute. So that's part of why God allowed them to go into captivity. The prophets kept saying, if you would just repent and start doing the things that God tells you to do, go along with, try to work with the king of Babylon and pay your tribute, he'll leave you alone. You guys won't have to go, the rest of you guys won't have to go into captivity. But Zedekiah would not listen. He ended up stopping paying the tribute, and because of that, that's when Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the city. So they will find records to say that that's what the Israelites have done in the past, but these people that have just come back did not plan on doing this. So that's where the false accusation is coming in. Part truth, because they're going to be able to find record of other Israelite kings doing this, but it wouldn't have been them. Okay, so verse 14. Oh, and before I go on, notice the motivation of how they're appealing to this new king that's in Persia. It's all about money. Boy, you start mentioning money. Oh, you're not going to get the money that you need for your tribute. They're not going to pay. So many times people make, you can get their attention if you say it's going to affect their pocketbook. And that's what it's a very strong argument that this king is going to make sure that he's going to take this letter seriously because it has to do with money. Okay, verse 14. Now, because we are in the service of the palace, and it is not fitting for us to see the king's dishonor, therefore we have sent and informed the king, so that a search may be made in the record books of your fathers, and you will discover in the record books and learn that that city is a rebellious city and damaging to kings and provinces, and that they have incited revolt within it in past days. Therefore, that city was laid waste. So that part is true when Zedekiah did that. But these people now, Zerubbabel and them, had no intention of doing that. Verse 16. We inform the king that if that city is rebuilt and the walls finished, as a result, you will have no possession in the province beyond the river. Oh no, not only is he going to lose his tribute money, but he's going to lose land now too. That's what the people are saying. You let these people finish this rebuilding of this temple in the city, and they're going to end up becoming their own empire. You're going to lose what you've got. Well, let's see what happens. Verse 17. Then the king sent an answer to Rahum the commander, to Shimshai the scribe, and to the rest of their colleagues who live in Samaria and in the rest of the provinces beyond the river. Peace. And now the document which you sent to us has been translated and read before me. And a decree has been issued by me, and a search had been made, and it had been discovered that that city has risen up against the kings in past days, that rebellion and revolt have been perpetuated in it, that mighty kings have ruled over Jerusalem, governing all the provinces beyond the river, and that tribute, custom, and toll were paid to them. Now, that would have been in the days of Solomon and David when they were over the kingdom, it prospered. So that is true. They found records of that, yeah, they did become a powerful kingdom. And it ended up being that nations around Israel were actually the ones that were paying stuff to Solomon and David, and the kings in Israel because they were the powerful ones. So he's scared now. He's saying, I found this to be true, what you're saying. Okay, verse 21. So now issue a decree to make these men stop work, and the city may not be rebuilt until a decree is issued by me. And he's not going to. He's never going to issue this decree. It's going to take another king that's going to be king, and it's going to be the future King Darius that's going to allow them to start rebuilding. Now, this King Darius that's going to allow them a few years later, after this king is taken off, so this is the order of the kings. You had Cyrus, then you had this guy take over, Artaxerxes, and it's not the same Artaxerxes that was the one that married Queen Esther. This is a different one. Sometimes they would have, again, Artaxerxes 1, Artaxerxes 2. They might have the same name, but it's not the same guy. So after Cyrus died, we had Artaxerxes take over, and he's going to rule for a little bit of time, and then Darius is going to rule. Now, we've got in the book of Daniel that it talks about this Darius that is reigning and ruling after the Babylonian Empire has been destroyed. On that night when Cyrus takes over, Darius was his son-in-law, and he was helping him take over the kingdom and rule the kingdom, but he doesn't actually have the authority of being the top king until this Artaxerxes is going to die, and then that Darius is going to be the one that ends up reigning and ruling. That was a co-rulership when Cyrus was there. Darius helped him, but when Darius takes on the kingship, he's all by himself. It's not a co-ruling situation. So this is going to be now a pause of there's going to be like 10 or 11 years that they have to stop their building. They haven't gotten everything done. It's going to sit unfinished because of this guy getting this letter. He's not ever going to reissue a decree saying that they can start rebuilding again. It's going to take Darius, the guy after him, that's going to be entreated by the Israelite people because 2 prophets are going to be sent to them. It's Zechariah and Haggai, that God has put it in the hearts of these prophets to go back to Jeshua and Zerubbabel and say, why aren't you guys finishing this city? Why aren't you finishing the rebuilding of the temple? God is not happy with you guys. You guys have stopped for all this time. He wants you to get back started again. You shouldn't have been fearful of those guys. You listened to them because you didn't come to me and ask for my help. Basically, this is how I would think that God's answering. It doesn't say that, but I'm thinking what could have happened of why they were too afraid to oppose this king's edict, because they didn't have faith to believe that God could protect them. I don't think he really wanted them to ever stop, but they got scared and they're going to obey this edict. And it's going to take these 2 prophets, Zechariah and Haggai, to get them to realize that God's not happy with them, that they need to finish what they started. But for this point, there's not ever going to be. Artaxerxes is never going to issue decree to get them to go ahead and authorize them to continue building. Okay, so it says in 21 again, so now issue a decree to make these men stop work, that the city may not be rebuilt until a decree is issued by me. He's not going to. And beware of being negligent in carrying out this matter. Why should damage increase to the detriment of the kings? Okay, so he's saying, you make sure when you get this letter, you stop them right away. This guy obviously thought, okay, I'm in danger of losing part of my kingdom and some of my money. They better make sure that they stop these Israelites immediately when they get this letter. Okay, verse 23. Then as soon as the copy of King Artaxerxes' document was read before Rahum and Shimshai the scribe and their colleagues, they went in haste to Jerusalem to the Jews and stopped them by force of arms. Okay, so yeah, they're being threatened with weapons to stop. But if they had entreated God, I really believe that God could have kept them safe. We see what Gideon was able to do with a small amount of people. When God's fighting on the part of a nation, when they've entreated them, they don't even have to lift a finger to have success. That God used 300 men against probably hundreds of thousands of men Well, it's impossible for 300 men, but when God's fighting on behalf of those 300 men, they got victory, and they did, and they could have done the same thing here, but they didn't. They're going to be afraid, and they're going to stop. So verse 24 says, then work on the house of God in Jerusalem ceased, and it was stopped until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Okay, so it's going to be 10 years that they are going to stop. They've been working on it for about 5 years, then they stop, and it's going to be 10 years later that it's going to be 520 BC before they start rebuilding again. So if they started building in 535 and it's going to be 520, we know that it was 5 years of building, 10 years of being nothing to being done.